Welcome to Teach Me a Lesson. I am Elliott G-B, and today we have a great episode for you. Being honest, I'm going to try to keep this brief, all right? This is a long one. Chris, we had talked about a lot of good stuff. I've known Chris for years, one of my best friends, and I got to say, I have never heard him talk this much, and I love it. I'm into it. So I'm going to try to keep this intro brief, just trying to get to the goods, the basics. First off, thank you so much for listening, for watching, for tuning in. It really means a lot. It really does, because in this day and age, you could be anywhere, you could be watching anything else, but you choose to spend your time here with me, with us. That's great. If you could make sure you're following or subscribed wherever you're listening or watching, that would be great. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, notification bells on, so you know every time we drop a new episode. That would be awesome. If you could also share the podcast, if you could tell friends, hey, this is a great podcast, I love it. If you could tweet it out, if you could, post an Instagram post to your story or something. I don't know why I need to go into detail about how Instagram works, but if you could just share it around, that would be awesome, because I want to try to get sponsors for this, and not because I want money. I definitely want to try to just cover the costs of this podcast and hosting and all of that. That would be great. But also I want sponsors that are actually things that I enjoy and things that I think would help an audience, and not, I'm not going to be on here talking about Blue Chew. Hey, everyone needs Blue Chew because look, fellas, ain't it embarrassing when the noodle don't work? I'm not going to be on here like that. I want to be talking about stuff and talking about products that actually I think can help the world and will help our listeners, because I feel like if you're listening to this, you're kind of already in a certain mindset. You're looking for certain things. So I feel like why not just make the podcast even more helpful in that sense? And I can't do that without listeners. They're not just going to give me money and allow me to, push their product. If it's just me talking to myself, that'd be great. I'd be doing that for a lot of products if that was the case, but that's not how it works. So just share the podcast, let people know, hey, this is something I really enjoy. Check it out. If they like it, cool. If not, tell them to keep it pushing. But also, if you like it, if you could rate and review on Apple Podcasts, 5 stars, 4 stars, 3 stars. As always, anything lower than that, let's talk about it like adults, so just email me, okay? All right there, pal. Also, make sure to follow the podcast on all social media platforms. We are on Instagram and Twitter at TMALPod, short for Teach Me a Lesson Pod. A little insider info there. We are on TikTok at Teach Me a Lesson Pod. So again, that's TMAL Pod, Instagram and Twitter, and TikTok, Teach Me a Lesson Pod. Also, join the Patreon if you're enjoying the podcast and you want to support. Join the Patreon. If you're looking on video, it's right here. Patreon.com/Elliott G-B. That's my name. It is my personal Patreon, and they're lumped in. So, if you enjoy the podcast and you want to support, and also, hey, maybe you want some of my merch, or maybe you want to play a game with me live on stream sometime, you can do all that at the Patreon. That is patreon.com/Elliott G-B. And you will also get bonus material for every episode. And when I say you want it for this episode, the Patreon bonus for this episode is pretty much like a part 2, because we were just really going off, really hitting some points. And had I not cut it out, this episode would have been like 2 hours long. So I had to cut a bunch of stuff out, but all of that is in the Patreon bonus. So if you enjoy this, make sure to go over to the Patreon, subscribe for just $5 a month. You get access to, or just $5 for 1 month. If you just want to listen to it now, I don't recommend it. That's not the best for me personally, but hey, I understand how the system works. You think I don't use stuff and then send it back to Amazon? Come on now. I'm in the game. I'm in the game too. I'm out here living. So for just $5 a month, you'll get access to this Patreon bonus, as well as for all the past episodes. If you can't afford that, but you still want to support, we have just $3 a month. That will definitely help. Again, I'm just trying to cover the costs of hosting and just break even a little bit, because I enjoy this and I'll do it no matter what. But if it could be a little financially easier in these trying times, why not? All right, so that's enough out of me. I said I was going to keep it short. I don't think this is very short. So without further ado, let's get into it. I hope you enjoyed this great conversation that I was able to have with my good friend, the very funny, the very talented, the TikTok influencer himself. He's not really a TikTok influencer. Don't worry. If that instantly turned you off, it was a joke. A little inside joke. We'll get to it. It'll come up in the episode. Don't worry. But yeah, enjoyed this great conversation with my good friend, Mr. Chris Mejia.
Okay, that actually, so like with how much like concerts cost, like if you got beat up at a concert but it was early on where there was still plenty of concert to go,
Yeah,
and you didn't get kicked out and the attackers walked away and left you alone, would you stay at the concert?
I'd
Like, I
position
paid $500 for floor seats, I'm not leaving.
I'd position myself so I'm in like a corner so I can still see the stage, but I can see everyone who's coming at me. Because if they walk off and we're still in a sea of people, I'm like, all right, they can come back.
Oh yeah, that's true.
So, because that's the thing. You you can stay, but you're not going to enjoy it because you're going to be like bopping, but you're going to be looking.
Each time someone bumps into you, like, oh fuck, here's
Yeah,
it. This is it.
you're ready to go. But you're like shoulders dislocated and shit. So you're like, I just haven't heard my song yet. I'll leave after my song. Come on.
I'm just trying to hear Father Trust My Hands Part 1 one more time and then I can dip. That's all I'm trying to do.
Would you stay?
No. No.
leave?
If I get beat up, I'm going home. Like, I think
If you got beat up first song, you would leave.
who's the artist? Like, who am I seeing? Like, if it's a top artist,
Taylor
like,
Swift. Because those tickets cost money. Adele.
no, Beyonce. Beyonce would be easier for me. If it was Beyonce and first song, I'm staying. I've always wanted to see Beyonce live.
You're just eating punches. Nothing will stop me from seeing the queen.
I would actually tell them to stop. Hold up. I love Sorry. I need you to just give me 4 minutes.
Can we
4
wait?
minutes.
I can stay on the ground, but I just want to hear it uninterrupted.
And then Beyonce goes to the sandcastles. I'm like, I actually don't like this song. It's too sad for me. You can
bring him in. Come on now.
Bring him in.
Just what?
Bring him in.
Not the face, please. Not the face.
This is my moneymaker. I need you. Everything else, beat the shit out of me. My legs, let's be real, I wasn't doing much with them anyways. So you can just take those out.
Wow, man, that's quite an admirable trait. Is that the lesson you want to bring to the podcast today?
Yes.
Is resilience?
Actually, no. So actually, this is kind of. So the lesson I want to bring in today, and this is going to be a little cheesy, but just stay with me.
All right.
Is enemies. The title of the lesson is
make enemies.
Yeah, make it. No. The enemy of my enemy is me. And I know that sounds.
Are you a preacher right now? What is this?
The enemy of my enemy is me. What essentially, when I thought of that and thinking about what I wanted to talk about today, was essentially the thought of like, oftentimes what drives people to want to succeed, like, is often spite. Like, oftentimes people tell you you can't do things, or people don't accept you. Like, for example, you apply to festivals, you don't get in, you don't get booked on shows, people say that you're not funny, things like that. And oftentimes for a lot of people, like especially myself, it becomes this motivation of like, all right, fine, you don't want to book me on this show because you don't think I'm funny. I'm going to come back and I'm going to get to the point where I'm so undeniable that you have to book me whether you like me or not. And like, that's a successful motivator. But what I mean by the enemy of my enemy is me is that we oftentimes think we have to succeed because there's so many people rooting against us, when in actuality, no one is watching us like that. No one is really, truly, actively out there rooting against you. Yes, there's people who are jealous of you because of moments where they see you succeed. But overall, there's no one like with a microscope looking at you and waiting for your downfall. And the person who's actually actively rooting for you to fail is yourself. So like, you think your enemy is other people who are hating on you and don't want to see you succeed, but the enemy of the person who you think is your hater is actually you. Like, you are your own worst enemy. You are your own, like, the person who's going to hold you back the most is yourself. Because at the end of the day, people aren't really out there trying to stop you. So because of that, I think oftentimes, whether it's you're a creative or whether you're a professional, trying to pursue a career or anything like that, oftentimes the person who is going to be your biggest roadblock is yourself, because you're going to be the one. Like, most of the times I didn't get stuff, yes, was because I applied and I didn't get in. But most of the time, the reason why I didn't get things is because I talked myself out of applying for it. Like, I was the one who was like, no, I'm not good enough, I'm not going to apply. Or, nope, I'm not big enough. So everyone else who gets into this festival are these big time comics. There's no fucking reason for me to apply to this. And then I say that to myself. I obviously don't get in because I never applied. And then when they announce the lineup for like the festival or whatever, I see people who, like, I don't even mean this in a negative way, but people who I'm like, I'm on their same level, or I'm like, I'm better than them, or this and that. Like, fuck, I should have applied. And then sure enough, the next year, that's the year where the festival gets even bigger. So then now the requirements for booking is even bigger. And then I just missed out on my opportunity to get on the ground floor at an early stage and have like that clout and credit of being a part of something that has grown to be much bigger today. But I never got that because I got in my own way and didn't allow myself to go for it. Like, and that's really like the lesson I wanted to talk about today, where it's just like there's so many ways that we get in our own way that our success is not going to be hampered by what we think is going to hamper it, which is like other people who hate us, or all of these outside factors that are going to get in our way, which is true. There's going to be gatekeepers, and there's going to be people who hate on you. There's going to be people who don't want to see you succeed, and that is 1,000% true. But we kind of have them live rent free in our heads of like they are constantly on the lookout for you, when people don't give a fuck about you to that level. Like, the only people who give a fuck about you to the level that you think people give a fuck about are people who this is a terrible example, but like an ex who just truly hates you. Like something like someone like either you wronged them or they wronged you and you have bad blood now. But even then, like, the amount of people who fit that compared to everyone else is so like radically small in comparison that we really don't have people watching us like that. Because oftentimes, I'm sure you've probably felt this, where like you want to post something, but then you're just like, shit, like I don't want to post this. I don't know if this clip's funny enough, and I don't want so and so to see this clip and think, yo, Chris isn't funny. Like, these are the clips that he's posting. When in actuality, people aren't just watching the clips like that. They're just like, oh, here's a clip. I'm not gonna finish watching. Keep scrolling. Like, that's really, and like, for every one person who says something negative about shit that you'll make, there's going to be a bunch of people who support it and like it, or at least enjoyed it enough to be like, I'm going to spend the 2 seconds it takes to like this post. And because of that, that's another way where we get in our own way, where we get so fixated on the small percentage of negative feedback that we completely ignore all of the positives that are coming out of it.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think oftentimes as creatives, what we make is really a portion of our own soul. Like, we're putting our heart and soul in everything that we do. Like, yeah, sure, we're saying dick jokes and shit, but like overall, like this is
my heart is in that dick joke. My
heart is in that dick joke.
My soul, that tag about the balls, that's where my soul lives.
But it's that whole thing of like, that's why we take it so, like, that's why, at least for me personally, when like I don't do well and it's a show that I wanted to do well, that's why I take it so personally, because it's like, oftentimes creatives, the thing that they're creative in is really the only thing they give a fuck about. It's the only thing that they actually care about, or they feel like, this is why I was put on this earth, to do this thing. So then when this thing doesn't go well, it feels very personal, because then you kind of feel like, I don't have a purpose.
Yeah.
Like, literally the one reason I was put on this planet, I didn't do well at. So like, what the fuck? So like, that's why like telling a comedian they're not funny can often be the most hurtful thing you can tell them, depending on like how you do it, who you are, and the time. Because sometimes people are like, you're not funny. I'm just like, you don't matter.
Yeah.
But sometimes people are like, you're not funny after you bombed, and it's just like, fuck, like, okay, all right, that hurts. I'm gonna go cry. But like, little bits of negative feedback are not a representation of how the world feels about you, because ultimately the world doesn't, as a whole, doesn't give a fuck about you. And I don't even mean that in a negative way. I mean that more in the sense of like, stop putting all of this weight on opinions that don't actually matter. And that's what I mean by we are our own worst enemy, because it's like we blow up and put on a pedestal and give so much more weight to shit that holds us back, that in the larger scheme of things do not matter.
Damn. I wrote a bunch of notes because you hit a shit ton of points. You really were off to the races at the jump, and I like it. I'm into it. But I do want to do a quick recap for people that might not be familiar with you, because you have mentioned jokes, you have mentioned, all that, so I'm sure they can put two and two together. You are a comedian. You're from Florida. What's tell people who you are in just a little bit.
So, super quick rundown of who I am. I grew up in Florida. Basically, I wasn't born there, but basically lived there my whole life. And I was always obsessed with stand-up comedy. Like, I don't know if this is embarrassing, but like George Lopez's "Why You Crying" was the first comedy special I ever watched. And I watched the special before that, but I was too young to really understand what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So the "Why You Crying" special, I was like maybe fifth grade or sixth grade, and I was old enough to understand like this is a thing people can do. They can just go on stage and be funny. And I was always like the class clown and all that, so it just really resonated with me. So then, middle school, high school, when everyone else was like always listening to music, I was always listening to stand-up albums. And in college, I always kept saying I wanted to do stand-up. Basically, finally tried it. Did it as a light hobby my senior year of college, like going to mics once or twice a month. Uh, it wasn't really something I wanted to pursue. And then when I moved here, initially I started doing stand-up because I was like, well, I moved to a new city. I don't know anybody. What else am I going to do? And I almost gave it up
Oh,
because I
really?
was bombing and eating a dick because I was new and I sucked. And I was moving to a different market. So I almost gave up. Like I was clearly on the phone with my mom, being in my feelings because I was like, I keep going to these mics and I'm not doing well. And my mom was like, well, Chris, like maybe it's just not for you. And like she didn't mean that in the sense of like I don't believe in you or anything like that, but just like trying to be like, hey, some things may not be for you. You gave it your best. It is what it is. If it's gonna tear you down like this, there's no point in putting yourself through this.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I'm gonna go to this one last mic, and if it doesn't go well, I'm gonna call it quits. And then sure enough, it goes well. And
Mm-hmm.
then here I am today doing stand up, where I travel a lot to do stand up. I run my own show. I also like in quarantine blew up on TikTok and started producing more content online and learning a lot about social media and stuff like that. Um, but basically, that's how I got to where I am today. Of like, uh, just like yeah, and that's how we met. We both
Yeah.
did stand up in Seattle. Abraham was actually the one who introduced us.
Yeah, yeah. Big shout out Abraham Tedessa, future guest of the pod. Was stand up and comedy like your first kind of creative um
No,
endeavor, I guess, or were you into like
so
music or art?
in elementary school and middle school, I went to a performing arts school, so I did acting. I was in
Oh, okay.
drama, uh, and so acting was really the first creative outlet that I had. And then I just didn't have an avenue to do stand up really until college because a
Yeah.
lot of the places like you had to be 21. So
Yeah.
I didn't have a car. Uh, so acting was it. And then when I changed schools in middle school, I went from a performing arts school to like a tech school. Their drama department, like compared to the art school, their drama department was incredibly unprofessional and shit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I was like kind of like
they're like,
pompous
bro, we ain't
about
trying
it.
to put on a play. We're trying to teach motherfuckers how to plumb. We talk about Othello, bro. We're doing welding. What are
Well,
you
not
doing?
that kind of tech school, like
Oh,
technology. Yeah, not that
oh,
tech
we're
school.
putting together circuits. What are you talking about?
But like because of that, I was pompous where I'm just like, they're so unprofessional. I don't even want to be a part of this drama group anymore.
Damn. So you were a
Uh,
real actor. You were real
yeah, I was a
Hollywood. You
real.
were
I was
Hollywood, Florida, not Hollywood, California.
yeah. So because of that, I stopped acting, and I've always wanted to get back at acting. But I think now, being this far into stand up, when you do any creative outlet, it really makes you relook at how other creative platforms are, and you understand how complex anything that is a craft. You understand how complex it is because so many different things, not even just creative things, appear easy to pick up. But once you try it, you don't realize how insanely complex they are,
Mm-hmm.
how much the amount of skill they take. Like for example, I started doing like boxing, like as a workout. So I've been doing lessons. And like once like learning, like I'm still learning the basics, but while learning those, I realized, oh, boxing ain't just jumping in a ring and just beating the shit out of some dude named Romeo. Like
Yeah.
it's an art form. Like it's a whole art form that requires all of this technique and skill and a lot of rhythm. You have to have a lot of rhythm to
Yeah.
be in boxing. But that shit, like my trainer was telling me, so many people come in and be like, "Oh, I want to spar." They're like, "Oh, but have you boxed before?" And they're like, "No." And they're like, "All right, like maybe you should learn the technique and stuff before." And they're like, "No, I want to
Yeah.
spar." And it's like,
I
okay.
want to
And
fight
then they go to
Romeo.
spar and they
Let me
get their
at
shit.
Romeo. Let me at him. Where's Romeo at?
I don't know why Romeo was. I just pictured like a Puerto Rican dude with tattoos. I'm like, yeah, Romeo sounds right.
I love that because that makes me think you've like turned on, people. Oh, you want to come over? We got pay-per-view. We're gonna watch the fight. Oh, who's fighting? It's blah 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 and blah blah blah. Well, it's not a real fight because neither of them are named Romeo. So it's like, what is this? What you call me when there's a real fight? When Romeo's in the ring?
But basically, like that's a craft, and
Yeah.
that's not something. It looks easy to pick up, but actually isn't. Same thing with acting. Same thing with stand up is like music. I feel like is an art form that everyone understands. You have to have something in order
Yeah.
to start it. Like you
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to have a singing ability, or you have to at least learn how to play something. You can't just get on stage with a microphone. But then I feel like every other art form, like art is probably another one where like, okay, I don't know how to draw, so okay, I can't do that. But like people probably think they can do dancing, and then they start trying to do dancing. They're like, oh fuck, this is hard. The same thing with acting. People just think acting is easy, and then stand up's probably the most infamous, where everyone thinks I'm funny.
Yeah.
I could do stand up, and they go on stage and they invite all their friends, and of course their friends are gonna laugh, so they think they're good at stand up. And then
Yeah.
once their friends start coming to their mics, they start eating dick. Then they realize, okay, stand up's like incredibly hard.
Well, here's the thing. That made me think of, so with music, it's like, all right, you pick up a guitar, you pick up an instrument, you try it, you're like, oof, I can't do this. This, clearly didn't go well. Art, you go, all right, I'm gonna draw a dog. You draw a dog, you're like, this looks fucking terrifying. Can't do that. But stand up, people are like, oh yeah, I've told a funny story before. I've made
Right.
people laugh. That's all it is, just going up there and making it laugh. Or making them laugh. So it's like that kind of feedback where it's just like, yeah, I've fucking done that once or twice, and I wasn't even trying. So if I try, yeah, I can easily do it. And then here's the curse: is they go to a mic, they tell all their friends show up, they do well because all their friends are there. And 9 times out of 10, they're being like, oh, my fucking buddies are here. Craig ate a fucking piece of cake that was like 2 weeks old once. And then he got like super sick and like pooped his pants. And then all his friends are like, Craig fucking did that shit. Oh my God. And so they're like, dude, I did pretty well at that mic. And then when their friends don't show up and they really get into it, then it's like, okay, now you will see the soul crushing aspect of it, of, like you said, telling a joke that you've worked hard on, you've put a little bit of yourself in, and it just fucking bombs. It eats the biggest dick. And you're like, this is not as much fun as I had the first time.
It's definitely like, once again, all art forms are the same, where it's very soul crushing when it doesn't go well. But like Mike Birbiglia has that joke where like you have to be delusional to want to do stand up, because at least if you do acting and it doesn't go well, you can be like, oh, they didn't like the play or they didn't like the script. Whereas with stand up, when it doesn't go well, people are basically being like, we don't like you.
Yeah.
Your personality. And like
Yeah.
that's the most true thing, where it's just like with stand up, it's all like your success and your failure is 100% on you.
It's
like,
all you. Because even if they don't like the joke, they're like, well, we don't like the joke, but you're the one who said it. And also, you're the one who made it. And you're the one who thought it was good. So, yeah, you are the problem here. It's all on you.
it's ensure there's moments where it's like the show wasn't set up well, so everyone fails no matter how good they are. Like, yeah. But it's still at the end of the day on you. So that's why, to tie everything back, uh, that's why, especially with stand-ups, you are your own worst enemy, because even though there's little things here and there that can affect your performance, at the end of the day, your success is because of you. So then, because of that, on one side, a lot of the things that are holding you back are not these environmental factors that you think they are. It's you. But then on the opposite side, the successes you have the right to be like, big dick, put it on the table. All of what's happened has happened because of me.
Yeah.
Like, I think oftentimes with stand up, especially, we get so fixated on what's the next thing, that we don't take a second and stop and recognize I pulled this shit off and it went well because of me. And like, that's another way where we get ahead of ourselves. We're like, just as much as we get too hyper fixated on the negatives and stuff, for the positives, we do the polar opposite, where it's like a blimp on our radar. Like, think about all of the times where you've been gunning to get a festival credit or to do a specific show or to like write a sketch, write a script. And then when you've been telling, oh, I'm gonna do this, like when I get this shit, like it's gonna be great. And then you do it. Think about how long you actually spent enjoying the fact that you did that thing. It's probably a minor amount of time. And like, yes, you should always be having one foot out the door and the next thing, but that's just one foot. Don't have both feet. Don't immediately. You've worked so hard to get in the room. You're not at least gonna grab a cookie. Like, you're not at least gonna be like, oh, so that's what the wallpaper looks like.
Yeah.
I think that's why often stand-up can be so soul crushing, because we either do not set the time aside to enjoy the accomplishments that we do achieve, or when we do, we downplay it. And it's just like, well, it's just this, or well, it's just like, I did that with myself, where like even you at times had to fucking remind me, where like me blowing up on TikTok was not expecting to happen, and it happened. And like right now I'm at like 116,000 followers. And
okay. How many Romeo got? How many does Romeo got?
Romeo got 120. But he got abs. But that's a lot. Like, for like everyone else, when I tell them, yeah, that's what I have, they're like, holy fuck, you're like big. And I'm just like, no. And the reason why I say no is because, oh, well, this person's 200, or this person's 300, this person's 400, yada, 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 yada. And it's just like, what you're achieving is still good. But you get so fixated on what you don't have, or what's next, or what other people have, that you don't take the time to take a step back and be like, I may not have this, but this is what I have, and what I have is fucking dope.
Yeah.
And like, what if we focus on that stuff more, we're not going to feel as bad going through this grind, because everything in life is a grind. But what can help recharge you is looking at the shit that you've accomplished. Like, I think it was actually on the Listas episode that y'all pointed it out. Like, no, it was with Taylor, where you're talking about productivity and making like to-do lists and shit like that. One thing I read is like, oftentimes when you make to-do lists, it just becomes like, a to-do list is essentially a list of shit you haven't done. It's a list of shit that is on your plate and that's going to stress you out, because you're like, I have all of this shit I need to do. And I read somewhere, they're like, if you're going to make a to-do list, the first couple items on your to-do list, put items that you're either doing literally right now in the moment, or that you just completed, so you can cross them off. Because then when you look at your to-do list, you don't look at it as, here's all of this shit I haven't done. It's, here's this partially completed to-do list that I have done, that I've already accomplished things. Because once you create the to-do list and then you scratch it out, you get like that serotonin kind of boost, where you're like, fuck yeah, I just did that. Fuck yeah, I just did that. Where it's like, why not give yourself that edge to be more productive? then you can look at it and go, this isn't just a dream. This is partial reality because I've accomplished something on this vision board.
Yeah.
And it's not that you're doing that to get like to cheat or give yourself credit that you don't actually deserve. It's to remind yourself you are capable of accomplishing what you want to set out to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, if you can accomplish this square of your vision board, which you did, that means the rest is not that unspeakable. It's not that impossible to achieve. So like that's why focusing on what you've actually done and like setting the time aside to finish something and be like, I did this. That was badass. And celebrating yourself. A big reason why we don't believe in ourselves is because we don't understand the weight of our own accomplishments. Because we understand the weight of what we haven't done and we understand the weight of when we fail, but we do not understand our own weight that comes from things we've done right.
Mm-hmm.
We just treat it like a to-do list of like, oh, I need to clean my bathroom. And then you clean your bathroom and you're like, all right, done, next thing. When instead, you got a clean bathroom now. Enjoy that. It's clean because of you. It's like the same thing with your accomplishments. Like enjoy the fact that you pulled off some shit, especially when there were so many reasons why you shouldn't have pulled it off, but you did. Mm-hmm. Like you got into that festival. Congratulations. And like sometimes we downplay it by being like, whoa, I got into this thing because I know this person, or I got into this because this. You could still know people who run shit, and you can still be from the area that shit happens and still not get it.
Yeah.
But you got it. So like, give yourself a break. Like, no one is being as hard on you as you. Just as much as you're the person who wants to see you succeed the most, you're the person who wants to see yourself fail the most.
Yeah.
Because once again, no one's on your dick like that. No one's on your dick being like, Elliott better not get this, or Elliott better not get that. No one no one in the world cares about you that much where they're actively rooting for you to fail.
Yeah.
The only person who cares about you that much that they're actively rooting for you to fail is you.
Yeah. It's funny when you first said that, when you first brought it up, I thought it was really funny. One, that we were talking about that game, the supervillain game before, because when you were putting it like that, this is the first time I've like thought about it that way, but I'm like, oh, the person you're describing, the like quote unquote hater that exists, that's like out to get you in the world, that person you're describing is a fucking supervillain. No one else has the time to dedicate to just making your life shit or plotting on your downfall or just like preying on your downfall that you don't. No one people have. How the fuck does that person pay bills? You know, they're, oh man, my lights are cut off. Don't you have like a job? No, I don't got a job. I'm just sitting here preying on Chris's downfall. I'm just like, I'm downvoting everything he posts. I'm posting bad comments. You know, I just don't want to see this dude win. Yeah, I haven't eaten in 2 weeks, but you know, Chris kind of feels like shit. So like, that fuels me. That fuels me to go harder. Like no one has that time to do that.
That's actually a very great analogy because it's like, yeah, like we just think there's these people who are like super villains where they're just like a Bond villain where they have a giant TV being like, yeah, Elliott would jerk off instead of writing a script right now. And it's just like, no one is like that
It's a giant TV with all of your posts and they're like, shit. No one has that.
Downvote. But unless you bomb in a way, or unless you fail in a way that's so like, there's like, you either like say the most problematic shit or you just do something that's just bad for that business, most likely whatever performance you had is forgivable and will be forgotten about at most. So it's like oftentimes we get in our heads of like, this thing's gonna be, I'm gonna do so, or I did so bad that I can't show my face again. You can show your face. Yeah, it's gonna be a little awkward because you can't have your dick on the table because you did well. But like at most, it's not. You're not banned. You're not banished unless you like pulled your dick out on stage, and then it'd be like, yeah, you can't come back here no more. Like you lost that right. So it's like no one's on you like that, where they're just actively remembering the shit that didn't go wrong. In fact, they forgot about you, and that's honestly the best thing that can happen.
Yeah.
People forgetting about your negatives is the best thing possible because you will always have a clean slate and a new chance to prove that was a one-time thing and I am much better than this. But
Yeah.
we think people have this permanent memory of this bad set that we had from 3 years ago because we remember it because we hyper fixate on the negative shit we do when in actuality no one gave a fuck about that failure, probably because they were too focused on their own failures and weren't paying attention.
The funny thing too, I want to ask a question, but I want to say this first though. The funny thing too, specifically about that example, is I had this bad set, blah blah blah. The not, I wouldn't say 9 times out of 10, but more often than not, that bad set did not go as bad as you thought it did.
Yep.
And that's either from people who are in the audience, or if you film it or you just like record it audio and you listen back, you're like, oh yeah, there was more laughs than I thought. That went a little better than I thought. But you're so in your own head in that moment that you don't, if it doesn't get whatever reaction, if it doesn't hit that bar that you're expecting it to, if it doesn't get that, you're like, well, this fucking bombed, that fucking bombed. But people who are there are like, we're laughing. Like, what are you talking about? Like, this went well. So even then, people might not remember that bomb because to everyone else, that wasn't a bomb, or things didn't go as bad as you thought. It's just kind of how you handle it. And then also, that's like getting in your own way is how you handle it. If you then freak out and act like this and that, and everyone's like, why is this dude so pissed? Or like, what's going on? Why is he so upset? That went well. That's you then getting in your own way about it. And now they're like, all right, yeah, now I don't really like him. But before, it was all right. It wasn't great, but it wasn't fucking terrible. It doesn't warrant this reaction. That's what we think. So that's kind of you getting in your own way. Like a more self-forgiving way to look at it. And something I've been like trying to work on myself is when those thoughts come up, definitely recognize them, be like, all right, they're valid, but understand, look, where they're coming from is that perfectionist side, like you said. Like, your goal is to win that crowd over. Your goal is to have a great show every single show, whether, or, whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's art, like physical art, visual art, or, music. Your goal is to make the best song ever every single time. Or if you're making an album, the best album ever, the best painting ever. If you're dancing, you want to have the best routine ever. You want to hit every single fucking thing flawless. Is that possible? No, that's not attainable. And I really, actually, now that I'm saying it, I think it wouldn't really show growth if you did, because you kind of have to fail to figure other shit out. So what I try to do for me is when those thoughts come up of, fuck, didn't do well, this didn't do as good, or I got kind of distracted by this and that, I realize that's coming from a place of perfectionism and wanting to be as good as possible every single time. But realistically, that's not going to happen. So that doesn't diminish the whole experience. So instead of getting caught up on, oh, fuck, this didn't go my way and blah, blah, blah. And now the whole, it was all shit. It's just like, okay, it didn't go that way, but let me be realistic about it. There were still laughs. I didn't bomb. I'm not worse. I didn't lose skills that I developed from it, but it just means I'm being conscious of my performance, and I understand, and I'm evaluating, oh, this didn't do well. And Alyssa and I kind of talked about it a little bit. It's like, if you fail and, you can kind of tell why you failed, same with that, constructive feedback that you were talking about earlier. If you can understand why something doesn't work, that's golden. That's better than kind of it going perfectly, like I was saying with the, the other people, because you're learning. You're showing that you're learning, and you're being, you're paying close attention to what's going on. And so you fail and you go, oh, I failed because of this. Or I think had I said this or gone this way, it would have been better. It's like, boom, you're learning, you're making those connections. So now if that comes up in the future, you know how to handle it.
Right.
So it's like kind of understanding and giving yourself that little break of being like, this didn't go well, or this and that. But I understand why it didn't go well. Also, I'm never going to be 100% happy with the set. So now that's the grain of salt. Now let me reevaluate it. Right. Okay, yeah, I didn't do as bad as I thought. And, all of that. But I do want to ask you and I feel like I kind of know the answer because we've talked about it so much, but is comedy where you learned? this whole lesson of not being in your
Yeah.
way and being
It's definitely because like it's the reason, it's definitely the reason why, and that's branched out into other areas of my life, but it's been the way because one, um, it's made me realize like some of the best advice I've ever gotten was apply for shit even if you don't think you're ready for it, because there's someone who's worse than you but believes in themselves more getting it because they applied and you didn't. And like that was kind of like the spark of realizing the person who's holding me back the most is me.
mm-hmm.
uh, and then what kind of helped me realize like no one's watching you like that is just the fact of like i remember I remember one time like the guy who was like my comedy mentor, um, and not in the sense that he was like I'm your mentor, I just looked up to him a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
uh, he told me once where I was just like, how do you get over like bombing? And he was just like, you're never gonna stop bombing. Like it doesn't matter how good you get, you're always gonna keep bombing. But realize that no bomb is going to define your career. Obviously, unless you do something major.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you bombed tonight, there's a show tomorrow. Just bounce back tomorrow. There's a show next week. There's a show the week after, whatever. You will bounce back. Every time I've had a period where I felt like I kept bombing, I eventually had a show that brought me back. And it's just that's just the way it is. You're going to have periods where you go down. That time you go down is not going to define you unless you do something that's like newsworthy of how bad you did. Otherwise,
Or
like
or if you let it. That's a thing too where
exactly, or you let it.
I've
Yeah,
realized with me is one, I just like having my own projects and doing my own shit. So it's like, okay, if this doesn't work out, I still have my own thing to work on. I'm not letting um my outlet for creativity or my productivity hinge on someone else allowing me to do it. Especially in this day and age with the internet and technology being where it is, you can make anything from home. I'm doing this from home. I'm doing all of this from home. And
right.
so when something else happens, like say like with a festival or with a show or something, if I don't get in, yeah, it sucks. But then I also think to myself, if I'm really down on it, I think, I kind of, this is what I've learned from therapy too, is checking in with myself. Okay, I'm really feeling some type of way about it. What does this mean? This means it probably meant more to me than I thought.
Right.
Either I understood that or I didn't. So like it really meant something to me. Okay. But am I going to sit here and sulk? No, because this isn't big enough for me to quit. Whether it's comedy or whether it's, just something personal. It's like, yeah, it can suck and definitely feel those feelings, but it's only as big as you let it be, you know?
Okay, so that actually ties perfectly into where like just like how no one's watching you like that for your failures, no one is comparing where you're at. Like no one's watching where you're at either. Like no one's watching your downfalls, and no one's keeping an eye on did did Elliot do this yet? Did Elliot do that yet? And by that I mean there's been so many times where I've driven myself in such a downward spiral of depression because I was like, I didn't get this festival, and I haven't done this festival, and I haven't done this festival, and I haven't done this, and I haven't done that. And I'm putting so much pressure on it because I'm like, well, so and so got into this festival, and so got into that festival, and so got into that festival, where it's just like no one's watching you with this checklist. No one's like, oh, you're this many years in and you haven't done this. Wow. No, because one, success is the timeline of success is relative. It is never linear. For some people,
Mm.
3 years in, they're already on a writing show. For some people, it took 15 years to get some shit going. And that does not mean they are any lesser or better. The amount of time it takes for you to do shit, you are going to get the shit that you get because it was the right time for you. Just like how people in high school who find their sweethearts and get married, you weren't meant to find your a high school sweetheart and get married. Those people, it was the right time for them to find that person in their life. Like, I know this is cheesy. I sometimes debate about the whole mentality of everything happens for a reason. I used to be a big fan of it, or not a big fan, but like I used to really believe that like things happen at certain times. Obviously now I'm more like just some shit happens and there's no point to it. Uh, But I do believe that sometimes you get things later in life because you weren't ready for it. Portland comic Shane Brennan, shout out to Shane, homie. Uh, I remember he like before COVID had a running joke on Facebook where whenever festivals would email their denials, he would post that he got denied, but worded it in a way that was like, "I'm pleasure to accept my denial from this festival." But the reason why I bring that up is because he was applying the shit that I was applying to, and I was like, "Fuck, like I'm not good enough. I didn't get it." And then I saw that Shane didn't get it too, and I was just like, "Yo, if someone like him didn't get it, I need, I shouldn't feel so bad."
Yeah.
Because like someone who I view above me is not getting this shit. So it's like just to bring that back to the point of like not everyone has all of these accomplishments. They have pieces of the puzzle. Everyone has pieces. And just as much as people have accomplished what you've wanted to accomplish, you've accomplished what other people have wanted to accomplish.
Yep.
And that's the whole point. You're going to get what's best for you in the timing that is best for you. And like you're either going to get stuff at the right time when you can succeed, or you're going to get it and not do well at it. But you got it at a time where you've developed enough as a person to critically analyze, why did this not go well for me? And that's either going to make you better at what you do, or it's going to make you realize you are meant to do something else. And you stop wasting time chasing a pursuit that's never going to be fruitful, and you're going to pivot to what you're meant to do. So like stop getting in your way where you tear yourself down because you don't have all of this shit, because you're viewing other people with what they have. But what you're forgetting is that they don't have a lot of shit either. So there's no point in comparing where you're at to where other people are at, because one, success is relative and it's not the same road for everybody. Some people, their road is quick, but some people, their road is long. But then once they finally get to their destination, fucking dreams come true. And it's all of this shit.
Yeah.
And the length of your road is not a determination of your quality and who you are as a person. Just in life, for some people, it takes longer. It is what it is. You can't control that. But that doesn't mean just because it's taking longer, that doesn't mean you aren't meant for something. It just means you're not meant for it right now. And you also don't know how long other people have been waiting to get something.
Mm-hmm.
You also don't know the amount of failures other people had to go to get to where they're at. We only see because of social media when people win. But we do not see the massive amount of L's in between. Like I remember Deezus and Mero on Hot 97, and they were talking about that with the show, where they're just like, you know, like with the success of it, they're just like, people always see what we do and they think we can do what you do, but they don't understand the massive amount of talent that we have, but also the massive amount of work and effort that we put into this. Because yes, we succeeded where we got the Vice show and then we got the Showtime show and all that, and we got on Complex and all that. There was a massive amount of L's in between. Like there was a huge time period where they were sharing Metro cards so they can take the train to go to fucking Complex to do, because like Deezus and Mero, if you don't know, is like a show on like Showtime where they basically watch clips, make fun of them, stuff like that. But it used to be like it used to be a podcast, and then it became a YouTube show on Complex, and then it became the Vice show, and then it became the Showtime show. So like when they were on the Complex days, there were two broke dudes from the Bronx who like were, Mero was fucking substitute teaching, and Deezus was literally doing like all types of temp jobs to just pay his bills, and they had to share a Metro card to go to Complex. But like people don't see that. People don't see the massive amount of struggles, the nights where they were just sitting fucking facing the window, drinking themselves, being like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, why am I chasing this? Like no one sees all of that. They only see when you post, I got this. So then they think everything just falls on their lap. But they don't see the amount of struggle and L's that you take. People don't see your L's just like as you don't see other people's L's. So it's stop comparing yourself to where other people are at, because guess what? To get where they were, they suffered a lot. just like how you're suffering a lot. And you're going to get what you're working for. Is just not going to be in the timeline that's the exact same timeline as them. Just like how no one's watching you, stop watching other people. Stop focusing on what other people have. In fact, one more reference on Freddie Gibbs's album "You Only Live Twice." The intro song ends with a quote from the Adult Swim show Black Jesus, where like Black Jesus is talking to this dude, and he's just like, he's basically saying shit just like, stop focusing on these things that other people have. Start focusing on what you do have. Like, yeah, this guy sells crack real good and he got a real good crack game, but that's not your lane, my guy.
Yeah.
Like, you are chef up that creme brulee. And it's like, that's the whole point where it's like, stop focusing on what other people have. Focus on what you've accomplished and what you can do and what you have achieved in the past, and just focus on your own lane, because your lane is not other people's lanes. Your lane means you're not going to get shit at the same time other people do. But that doesn't, just because you didn't get it at the same time doesn't mean you're not going to ever get it at all.
Yeah. Focus on your lane, and also understand the worst thing you can be told is no. So don't get in your way in that sense of watching other people and getting too caught up on what they're doing and them. Because I'm going to try to keep it brief, but I got caught up in that, thankfully, an hour before I had therapy, because I saw a dude that we kind of started at the same time in the same place, and he's headlining the home club. Now, one, I knew that was going to happen. This wasn't the first post about it. I knew it was happening. I just happened to see the post that day when I was already thinking how kind of slow shit's going for me now. So I moved to LA last year during the pandemic. So everything was kind of closed. Now that things are reopening, I'm like, oh, okay, now I am restarting for real, even though I've been here a little over a year, starting from the bottom. And I was thinking like, man, things are going kind of slow, or not. They are slow, but not compared to other people. But that's what I was doing, is I was opening Instagram, seeing everyone post about their shows. Oh, this and that. Blah. I'm like, man, I'm not doing that. I'm not blah, blah, blah. The real reason was I was frustrated that I don't have this outlet that I want, or, things aren't going how I want them to, whatever. But then the comparison started, and then seeing this post about this friend who's the homie who, again, has headlined that club once before. He works incredibly hard. We are two very different kinds of comics. He is incredibly talented and very fun. So it's all this stuff that I know why it's happening.
Right.
But it's just that I allowed myself to compare when I was already feeling kind of self-conscious and not the best about it. And that just kind of drove it in. And I really got in a mood, luckily, an hour before I had to do therapy. So she was like, all right, how's it going today? And I was like, well, here we go. Because this is perfect timing. This just happened. So let's fucking figure it out. And yeah, so it's kind of like, I think, to sum up what you're saying, and definitely let me know if I'm wrong, is don't get in your own way by letting yourself slip in that comparison, because it seems, that's kind of the trick of it, is it seems like it's valuable, or it's viable, I should say. Like, it makes sense because you're like, we have these things in common, so therefore it's not really apples to oranges, when in reality it is apples to oranges, because there's so much other shit that you don't see, or experiences that you could never have because you're not that person, that completely negate all of that. Right. So don't get in your own way by slipping into that trap, and also don't get in your own way by thinking you can't do a certain thing because of X, Y, and Z. So that's why I say the worst thing you can be told is no, because it's like, I thought it when I was right when I was about to move from Seattle, and I was like, oh, I'm about to leave. Let me ask to be on every fucking show that I can, because the worst that can happen is they'll say no. Now, if they want to hold a grudge about it and act fucking weird, it's like, all right, man, it's this business. You should be asking for stuff, whatever. I guess it's more the thing, if me just asking to be on this is going to ruffle your feathers so much that you hold a grudge, then that's a blessing for me, because I don't want to work with someone like that. That's a very unprofessional person. I'm kind of doing myself a favor. But the worst that can happen is they say no, and I go, all right, yeah, I get it. No hard feelings, whatever. I'm going to keep pushing. So I think Does that sum it up? Is that kind of what you're saying?
No, and in fact, that ties back to what I was saying earlier at the very beginning of like how we hold ourselves back because we're not applying for things. Like
Yeah.
oftentimes with bookings, we're like, why am I not getting booked more? It's because you're not asking.
Yeah.
Like we just assume, like we treat working as like shit's gonna fall into our lap. But I remember the best advice I've ever gotten was like, if you want to get booked more, just hit up people because you aren't in people's minds like that. And sometimes people just need you to hit them up so they can be like, oh yeah, this is a person I can book.
Yep.
Like now producing my own show, it's made me understand why I didn't get booked on shit. It's never personal. It's just when you're thinking of people, there's just gonna be some people who are great who just don't come to mind.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to like make that effort of like when you reached out, you got booked a lot, and it probably showed you, fuck, I probably should have been
Yep.
bugging people like this a long time ago. And like that's how we get in our own way of like we just think I'm just gonna sit here and be funny and people are gonna approach me, and then we get upset that we're not getting booked more, and we think it's personal when it's not. Like there's some Seattle comics who claim they're not getting booked because of X, Y, and Z, and it's like no, because you're not reaching out. Stop being, stop being, getting, stop getting blocking yourself in the sense that your ego is getting so big
Yeah.
that you think you have to be requested when there's going to be shit that you could be the biggest comic in the world that you're still going to have to request to get. So it's like understand that like yeah, no, what you were saying was perfect where it's just like sometimes you just got to like ask. Sometimes you're not getting shit not because you're not good enough. You're just not getting shit because you're just not asking for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one knows it. Or like when you're comparing yourself to others, it's like being in a food court and being upset someone's got chicken strips when you got chicken nuggets. Like it's just
Yeah.
like you have your own shit on your plate. Like you're not empty.
Yeah.
And then just like how when you're not asking, it's like sitting around in the food court being like, I'm hungry. And it's like, well, there's food all around you.
Yeah.
Just get up and go get it. It's like, no, but people should be hitting me up. Well, that's not, unless you're famous, no one's going to do that. So
Yeah.
just get up and go.
It feels good and that's what you want to happen, but realistically, it's not going to happen more often than not. It will happen
Right.
sometimes, but also you can't fully just rely on that to cover all the bases because it won't.
Because the show that is repeatedly booking someone instead of you, they're probably doing that because that person's asking and you're not asking. And oftentimes, there's been times where I've asked to be on shows and they're like, oh, I've been wanting to book you. I just didn't think you were interested.
Oh, yeah. See, there you go.
And it's like, yeah, of course I'm interested. You should have assumed. Sometimes there's shows that people put on that people just aren't interested in doing. That's a thing.
Yeah.
And like sometimes people view you higher than you view yourself. So they're like, Chris is not going to want to waste his time on this show when it's like, I've wasted my time on worse shows. Of course I want to do your show.
When in reality, it's like Chris has a lot of time. So yes.
So it's like, just fucking ask for shit. Don't let your ego get in your own way and just ask for shit. Because
Yeah.
you will be surprised how much you will get when you ask.
Yeah.
And that applies to everything in life. That applies to like jobs. You're not going to get a job if you never apply for one. It's rare that you're going to be headhunted. So just apply for shit. And like, what's the worst thing that can happen? They say no, and then you're in the same position that you're in now if you didn't ask, but at least you know you tried and you gave it your best. Or like when it comes to like dating and you're just like, I don't make the first move. Okay, then you have to wait for shit to fall in your lap. And so far, the shit that's been falling on your lap is trash.
Yeah.
So how about take some initiative? You're not going to get things in life if you don't put the effort in. The enemy of your enemy is you is probably the worst way to word it. But basically the whole point is just like, no one's watching you like that in the sense where they're hating.
Yeah.
No one's comparing you the way you're comparing yourself. Like you are getting in your own way more than anything else. Like your failures are like the person that's holding you back is you.
Yeah.
So just like you said, work smarter. Stop being worried about other people, how other people feel, because they don't give a fuck about you like that. Stop comparing yourself to others because everyone's lane is different. And if you do that, you're gonna and like you also make sure you take the time to heal and self-care and all that, you're gonna enjoy this long, brutal road more than you currently are.
Are there any books or anything that you've read that have really helped you, or podcasts you listen to, or shows, or?
No, I think there was a book I read a long time ago called The Definitive 20s or something like that that had a
Mm,
good point of just like that kind of taught me some initial like, yo, bro, you're not gonna figure this shit out. Just take your time.
yeah.
Um, but there isn't really like a book. I think, for example, the biggest thing that helped me was like John Mulaney interviewed Bill Hader for a panel on the 92Y.
Mm,
And in that, Bill Hader talks a lot about like him and John Mulaney on SNL and like other shit like that, and like how he deals with his anxiety, even though now he's like directing and writing and running uh, that show on HBO.
yeah.
I can't remember.
Barry.
Barry. There we go. Like another thing, like to kind of tie it back to like give like be easy on yourself. Like Bill for the longest time was just like I have anxiety, but like how the fuck do I get over it? I have to perform the show and all that. And he finally realized like what helped him prepare like act in SNL despite all of his anxiety was just like acknowledging that he was anxious and that he was scared. And like sometimes that small acknowledgement, like we feel like we have to be tough and we can't. Sometimes we just gotta admit with ourselves, like I don't have anxiety. So like that interview helped where it was just like helping me realize like it's okay to just give yourself that credit of like you're not perfect and you're feeling anxious in this moment. Or like you're about to go up and even though you've done stand up so many times, you're still nervous. It's okay to just acknowledge I'm nervous about this set. I'm nervous about it going well. So like the interview between Bill Hader and John Mulaney on the 92Y, uh, that one's good. The Jesus Amaro Hot 97 interview is good because that's where they talk about like they had massive L's in between and there's their journey to where they're at. And also, I think there's a Breakfast Club interview with Issa Rae where she talked about her come up.
Mm,
And there was a lot of really helpful and insightful shit in that, where she makes a good point of like we focus too much on networking up, where we don't realize we need to network laterally.
mm.
Uh, but like I would say those three. I know I made a joke. I don't really read books,
No,
but
it's fine.
that shit was. I would say those interviews was what was super helpful.
Word. All right, man. Well, fucking appreciate you coming on and dropping the tons of knowledge that you did. And again, was not expecting it, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy that this is how it went.
Now I know who I am. I knew you were expecting me to come on for an hour and be like coochie this, coochie that, and then no, I had some knowledge starts, baby. That's actually so. I want to say I love that you're doing this podcast because I think this is a really great fit for you.
Thank you.
But then also as well, I feel like as comics, we don't really get the opportunity to show our depth, like as a person. Um, so like also I loved this because it allowed me to show like I'm more than just some dude who says coochie online. Like yes, I tweet about coochie a lot on Twitter, but I also have some good serious shit to say, and I don't have an avenue, or I haven't figured out an avenue to do that.
Yeah.
And like I think something like this is greatly appreciated, where it allows like people like me to show that versatility, but it's also allowing you to show that versatility as well. Like making people laugh is funny, but sometimes we just want to talk about some serious shit, and no one wants to take us seriously because we're too busy talking about dicks on stage.
And coochie on Twitter.
And coochie on Twitter.
Well, speaking of the Twitter, the coochie on Twitter, where can people find you on social media if they want to hear, maybe more of that coochie side? They say I like this side, but I'm interested in that coochie side.
At Topher Mejia, TOPHER MEJIA on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Twitch. And if you live in the Seattle area, I co-run an outdoor show called Good Comedy. We've been doing it at Bad Jimmy's Brewing at Ballard. This New Year's Eve, we're going to be doing a end of the year shebang at Hales Ale Palladium. We would love to sell that out. Every show we've done has sold out, so I strongly suggest you buy your tickets ASAP. And next year, we're going to be expanding to an indoor venue that we can't announce yet.
Ooh.
but we got that on the way. So just follow at Good Comedy Show on Instagram. And I also have a podcast, We Didn't Get a Rose, which is a recap podcast of The Bachelor and Bachelorette. So we didn't get a rose podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Um, but yeah, thank you very much for having me. I love this. Sorry, I know this went super long, so I'm very sorry.
No,
But
it's dope. I'm just, hey, if you're listening right now and you're not in the Patreon, get in that Patreon, because this Patreon episode is gonna be fat. It's gonna be fat. PHAT and FAT. But no, man, I appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun. Appreciate you listening, watching. Until next time, tune back in when we're back with another great guest and another great lesson. All right, we'll see you later. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Bye.
bye.